Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and whenever you're watching this live. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how to create willpower without the normal motivator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tech check to make sure that we're live. And we are. So obviously, as the title suggests, we're going to talk about how to create willpower without the ordinary or normal motivators. So if you are jumping on live, come and say hello. And if you are watching on the replay, as I expect many of you will be, don't forget to put hashtag replay. Obviously, normal motivators give you a buzz or that initial spark, but where are they? Or they are nowhere to be found when you need them the most. So obviously this video has come up because I did that poll before Christmas to find out what sort of topics you as group members wanted to know more about. And obviously motivation was like top of the list, and willpower I have heard probably hundreds if not thousands of times, be it on with clients, with calls, and ultimately messages with other people over probably the nearly 10 years that I've been doing coaching. And obviously, this is to follow on from the video that I did last week, because we want to garner and gain, the willpower to do our goals, to do exercise, to eat in a manner, and to have a positive outlook on the world. And obviously, as I'm recording this in the winter, those two are going to be quite low because of, okay, I'm in the Northern Hemisphere. For some that are in the group, then sometimes it's not so relevant. But obviously the weather plays a factor on your behavior, your habits, and ultimately your motivators. So most people will go to motivators when it comes to podcasts, YouTube, videos, music. Those are motivators. And obviously, how do you create motivation external to that, James? And obviously, I'll elaborate on that now. I had a discussion with a fellow coach last week where we looked a little bit at this in terms of where your behavior can be quite destructive in a way and can be detrimental to your progression. So he coined the term that I'm going to nick going forward is connection versus competition and conflict. And what I mean by that is ultimately, as human beings, we're looking for that connection to fit in, to move in the right circles. We don't want to be on the external. So be it, obviously, most people know that I did sport at a high level. So I'm a very hyper competitive individual. But that can be detrimental to connection, because ultimately you're trying to drive a wedge to win. Ultimately, what's the motive behind that? There's not one. And obviously the conflict of that is you're going to cause yourself to be separate from the group. So obviously when that occurs, obviously motivation is going to go down, your confidence is going to come down, and your willpower to do anything is going to be quite low, because I've now put myself on the external. You might say, why is this relevant? But it stems back to, for me not being good enough, or Why aren't you? What he asked me is, why aren't you good enough right now? That comes back to a conversation I had as I think I was about 13, 14 years old with a teacher saying I would amount to nothing. Ultimately, that's going to play a massive part on teenagers' psyche. And ultimately, you're going to start to believe some of that behavior. That sentence becomes a behavior. So your willpower is going to drop because of somebody's beliefs of you. And why I say, why aren't you enough right now, is a very difficult question for people to ask, because if you put it into context, and if I made it, you had to internalize that, is very difficult. I can't answer that, internalize it. I have to think very hard. But externally, you would probably judge yourself to be it, and I'm going to use another example to prove my point, to either discredit what you think or to obviously reinforce that. And this is a podcast that I listened to a couple of days ago, and Gary Vee, who obviously most people may or may not know of, that's all right. He was talking about, you need to look at it from a perspective of looking at judgment from the edges or the fringes. Is you need to look at judgment as somebody that you don't know. So social media, some random person in the street, etc. Versus obviously on the other end of the spectrum, your family members, maybe mom or dad. The problem with that is obviously you care what your family think. Obviously, some people might not agree that if they did not come from a loving and supportive background, that's going to be a challenge. But if you've come from that environment, it's very hard to challenge somebody that cares for you, because their only outcome is to do it out of love and care for them to dismiss your goal or your dream as, you can't do this. Are you sure about that? And pretty much I could probably go on and on. But obviously you're going to believe that because obviously you care about them. However, on the other side of the spectrum, and I faced this probably, I can count it probably on two hands. It's not that much, but be it's obviously going, as I get more and more out there, this is only going to get worse for me. So be it for you guys to be able to be able to utilize it into your own lives. It's looking at, be it Slimming World, Weight Watchers, you name it. It's kind of giving the proverbial fu to that individual. It's kind of looking at it is, who the f are you, but no thanks, because it shouldn't really matter what that individual thinks of you when it comes to your goals. If you start believing to what they say, it's going to also be detrimental to your willpower. And it's very difficult to say no to people. I'm one of those individuals. I'm getting better at this, because ultimately, if you people please, it's not going to get you anywhere, and ultimately, it's going to undo a lot of the work that you do, because it's looking at obviously life as a cup half full. If you are giving energy to other people, it's going to take away from you. So ultimately, if it's not in a going into a positive place, or it's going back mutually, obviously that's you giving away something for free, and there's nothing in return. So that would be a bit you can see where I'm going with this. And obviously from the family member perspective of this, is saying to that person, it's going to be tough. You don't necessarily have to say it to their face, is, I love you, but no thanks. I've done that probably 2, 3 times in my life a family member that have been dismissive of my goal before coaching of why don't you get a 9 to 5 job? No thanks. I want to become a professional athlete. I obviously listened, but I don't agree with what you have pictured for me going forward. And ultimately, I had a pretty good willpower. Then I'm pretty motivated. People say it more than I can imagine in terms of like what inspiration you are and what motivates you. In terms of I enact some of those things. It is a challenge to be able to challenge judgment because obviously everybody's heard you are the harshest critic. That obviously needs to kind of be stopped because it's toxic. But you wouldn't challenge somebody on the fringes when your willpower is low. You will do when it's higher because you will see it as black and white. And ultimately, if that person is stopping you from achieving your goal, you go, hang on a second. I'll give you 2 choices. You can stand aside or I run you over. Okay, that's probably quite dramatic and quite ruthless, but it's the truth. It's like you if you've got a goal in sight and you're taking momentum, the only way of stopping something is putting the brakes on. So it could be that person. It could be worst case scenario yourself because you are your harsher critic. So you're going to be that person that imposes the way that you think. So that's going to be steered the perspective that you take. You don't necessarily have to agree with my description or my perspective on willpower, but it is an opinion. You could take it and take action on it, or you could go, no, I don't agree with James. It's willpower is I need to have everything in alignment to be able to have everything perfect. I would argue, as I put it in last week's video, that's perfectionism. That's going to cause problems. The other end of that spectrum is not going anywhere, which is procrastination. You are obviously not content with where you're staying at, but you're not moving forward. So the two, in my ideology, are one in the same because ultimately you're stuck. You're looking for the opportune time to start something. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, motivation is nowhere to be seen when you need it most because ultimately you have got to be the driving force behind that in the first place because you've got to find that initial spark to go, okay, this is my goal. It could be to lose weight. It could be to run a marathon. It could be going to the moon. It could be whatever. But you've got to be able to implement a game plan as how do you get that. There's going to be bumps in the road. I can't masquerade and say that doesn't exist because that would be lying because everything worth doing is obviously got to fight for it. So there's going to be bumps, there's going to be twists in the road, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be absolutely you name it in terms of adversity that's going to stand between where you are now and where you want to get to. And willpower and motivation is a vehicle. It's not necessarily you need one or both, but you need to have the underlying belief that you can achieve it. The problem is, and this is probably why people have pinpricked and said motivation is the issue, it's not. Because ultimately, if you believed in yourself enough to get to the outcome, you would have the motivation already, because ultimately I've got the belief that I can get from A to B, thus I'm going to do it. The problem with the belief is ultimately way under the surface. It's you as the individual. And this is obviously when it gets more complicated, because you're looking over, I'm 35, so we're talking about 3 decades of absorbing information, absorbing environmental pressures, people's beliefs, schooling, you name it. Pretty much I could have turned out, as I mentioned early on in this this live, you're not going to amount to anything. That almost derailed my life, because I got to a point where I was hearing it so much, I started believing it. And that's what we're talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. It's not a lot, but my confidence went down. My willpower went down. My motivation to do anything went down. I wasn't doing well academically. That was about it. But to say I would amount to nothing, okay, as an adult, I would love to hear the teacher's point of view to kind of what was the rationale to be able to take it. And I can laugh about this, but in seriousness, what was the motivator for him to do it? Because ultimately, yes, some people are going to respond to that and prove the person wrong. Some are going to rise to the occasion, and obviously some people aren't. I fell in that category of I didn't. It made things worse. I ended up having to change schools, not just because of that teacher, but just so I could get a fresh start. That's the environment I was in. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. Just go from one school to the next, and the environment was totally different. You're amazing. You don't need to be here that many times to go, well, yeah, I think I'm amazing. Thus, I'm going to higher my expectation of myself, and I'm going to raise the bar of what is achievable for myself. And that's probably the catalyst for me going on to obviously doing the sport at high level, because it's like, okay, I'm doing well academically. I'm very confident in the sporting arena. What have I got to lose? However, on the flip side, if I was still being in that same environment of that school, it's very toxic, and I would have not done anything. I'd have stayed where I was and probably gone the opposite way. And the moral of that story is, okay, and some people have heard this before, and I've said it a number of different ways in terms of the analogy with the teacher, is yes, I did utilize that teacher for motivation for a period of probably 10 years, just to, when I had those low days of, oh, this person used to tell me this. No, I'm going places ultimately, and it'd be fuel. Yes, some people will say that is ammunition, and it serves a purpose. I would agree in a sporting arena, yes, because ultimately you're using it for, I'm going to put in quotations, good, and that's loosely, because it's going to serve me in the arena that I'm in. Subconsciously, it's still there, because I'm still a little bit annoyed, because why would you say that to somebody and not have the due diligence of what scars that would leave after the fact? But okay, mental health's come a long way in 20 years. But somebody asked me this a few months ago in terms of, could you utilize that in the general populace? I would say no, because ultimately, if you were to use negative energy time in and time out, day in and day out, it's going to drain you as well, because it takes a lot of energy to cultivate going into that space of frustration, of anger, of annoyance because, and I'm just going to use me, it's bitterness. I'm going to do everything that I can to disprove that person's hypothesis of myself. It shouldn't matter. That's his opinion. He's got the right to it. I don't agree with it, but to go into that negative state all the time is very, very difficult if you're not aware of it. I can occasionally do it, but I've chosen to go the opposite direction. So I can go to positivity to some degree, like bring joy to somebody's life, happiness. It's a little bit more uplifting than to go the opposite way and go into, oh, I need to get myself angry to get myself motivated. Okay, it worked for some, for other people it won't. So it might be a case of utilize the two. But coming back to the initial story of the one discussion I had with the coach of connection versus competition and conflict, that is what I'm talking about. Because if you're not able to see why you're going into a negative space or not, you're going to create conflict, you're going to create competition, you're going to create disconnect. And that's ultimately going to drive a wedge and you're going to be left on the outside. So for me, I use the analogy, and that coach didn't like this, but I'm going to use it, is if I'm to disconnect myself, be competitive and create conflict, I'm going in a bunker. And anybody that comes towards me, I'm going to just mow them down. Yes, that works when you think of, if I use the negative energy, that's exactly what you're doing because it's a defense mechanism. Thus, anybody that comes close to me that is a threat, let's get rid of them. As you get older, that's going to be a problem because if you are pushing people away, you haven't got beacons or beacons of hope, if people want to put it that way. For when you are in times that are challenging and you haven't got all the answers, those people will maybe be able to help you out, give you a lifeline because you've not pushed them out at length because you're trying to be I don't want to say the set, you don't want to be the man because you're trying to utilize normal motivators. There is no such thing as the normal motivator. It's just an industry, so to speak. My mindset is $1 million industry in terms of people always seeking the information to acquire things, but it's acting those things. If I was to say to you, do something simple and do it over and over again, you get very, very confident at it. Oh, yes, I can do that. I can motivate myself to do that. That's not a big deal. If it's something that you've never done ever in your life, oh, it's a challenge. Yeah, because it's so far away. It's you can't see yourself to ever be able to achieve it or reach it. And this is obviously where New Year's resolutions are massively garbage because people have the right intentions. However, they don't go in with it for the majority. I'm not going to say everybody. For the majority, they don't have a game plan. They don't know how they're going to get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, for use a kid's analogy. A goal doesn't exist, but obviously every time you look at a rainbow, or there's the sun and the rain is there, okay, you talk about it. A child doesn't have that. It's, oh, I want to achieve, I don't know, professional athlete, be a firefighter, you name it. They've got aspirations that want to do it. And the only problem that gets in the way is society of, no, Jimmy, you can't do that. John, no, you can't, you that's too hard. Those are generally speaking, your family members that are saying that, because if they've tried it in the past, be it in the entrepreneurial space, it's not worked. So, oh, James, please don't do that because it didn't work for me. That doesn't give you good aspirations, because it's like, well, you're stopping me because you have failed, not necessarily because I will fail. It's because you had a bad instance of failure. People that repeatedly fail multiply, they look at the bad side of failure. It's like you've done this thing over and over again. However, you're not learning from it. And sport is a very good analogy for this, because ultimately the saying goes, you learn more from losing. Sport knows that very clear. It's like you can mask anything you want with a winning team. They could be garbage. They're winning, so it paints over the cracks. So you don't have to do the work. Whereas if people were able to have another person's point of view or perspective with that failure, could be, okay, we need to make a tweak here, tweak there. You do realize you've done this over and over again, and it's just a little bit of perspective of, you feel like you're breaking down. I'm going to use mindset for this, as opposed to you're breaking through. It's a massive difference perspective. One is negative, one is positive. One is positive, going to give you very much reaffirmation of the motivator of why you're doing it. Oh, I want to do more of that. The opposite, I'm breaking down. It's not worked. Let's rip it up and start again. And that might not be the case. I'm using extremes, but that is what it is. Well, what I want to hear from you guys, and this is what I do in future videos, is the call to action, is I'd love to hear your questions on this specific topic. If I've not answered an area that you had an opinion on, thoughts on, a particular question that I've not thought to answer, put it in the comments, and obviously I'll answer that. If you want to accelerate your goal and achieve it faster, let me know in the comments, in terms of, this is stuff that I do with my clients all the time, and are getting amazing results. It's something that they implement into their family lives, and will go to other individuals of, I've spoken to James and we've done the XYZ, why don't you do this? And it helps massively define the family dynamic. It might be that you listen to my podcast more regularly. And this is obviously something that I have a great passion about, is in terms of behavior, people's habits, their mindset, and what motivates them. Because if that's what's stopping you from achieving your goal, is a word, we need to address that. We need to address that balance. So that has been this week's video. So I'm going to reaffirm the call to action. If you've got any questions that haven't, or if you have a question that I haven't answered, or you want a different perspective on your thoughts on that, drop it in the comments and I'll answer it. Secondly, if you wanted to accelerate your progress, it could be with weight loss, it could be with your mindset, could be a combination of the two, drop coaching in the comments and let me know, and obviously we can have a discussion privately. And then thirdly, if you haven't checked out my podcast, I definitely go and say, come and subscribe, because you're going to learn some more things. And it's not just me talking, it be the guest perspective and challenging people's perceptions on adversity, mindset, you name it. So once again, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation today, and I hope you did as well.